right, I'm going to do something a little different tonight. Here's my Highway 1 Strat I love. We're going to recount or list the top 10 worst singers of rock and roll that we all love, that I love certainly. So there are some good singers in rock and roll, and there's some not so good ones, and we sometimes the not so good ones are just as popular as the good ones, which is kind of funny. So, but I compiled a little list of the top 10 worst singers in rock and roll, and then parenthetically that we love. Let me just say a little bit about it. I don't know if anyone was ever in middle school choir like I was, but we had a choir director that was always trying to get us to sing properly, and he would explain how to stand, how to breathe. He would have breathing exercises, how to pronounce vowels. So he would want you to all open up and sing from your diaphragm and use your mouth like that. And of course, he thought just about every singer you could name was a bad singer with those standards, which are basically classical music standards. I respect that a lot, but it was kind of funny, and we used to kind of make fun of him. And I remember once he said Johnny Mathis wasn't a good singer, but he knew Johnny Mathis had a great voice and millions of people loved his singing. But he was explaining it to me how Johnny Mathis wasn't actually a good singer. But so we're not using those standards as venerable as they may be. We're going by different standards. But what criteria are we using for the top 10 worst singers? Well, first of all, there are great singers in rock and roll that just sing great. They don't. Some of them, don't play guitar or anything. They just are true artists with the voice. Roger Daltrey, Don Henley. Of course, he plays drums a lot, but again, just a golden set of pipes. Paul Rodgers. I mean, the list could go on and on of people who are truly great voices. Sing great, spend a lot of time thinking about it. Then there are some that just kind of they're playing and they kind of open their mouth and whatever comes out. That's the vocal, and sometimes that's great, but a lot of times it's not categorized as what you would call good singing. So I'll say a little about that. But a couple things I wasn't looking for out and out bad singers. One name that I thought of was Yoko Ono, and I've heard her. I have Live Peace in Toronto, and it's so bad. I'm not even going to include that. That's really in a category all by itself and doesn't really belong on this list. It's the other thing is I'm not including people that might have sloppy voices, but still what I would call good voices. Like Greg Allman, he's sloppy. Rod Stewart, has that raspy voice people used to always make fun of, but it's a signature sound, and he has a great voice in a way. So I kind of when I thought of people like that, Levon Helm. I didn't include them. So I thought about people who maybe even more so exemplify bad singers in rock and roll. No, some of these people I love, so I'm just kind of having fun with that. I'm not really trying to say these people stink or anything. Some of them are actually my favorites. But so let's go through the list. Coming in at number 10 is Mick Jagger. Now, Mick Jagger I love the Stones, so I'm a Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, they're great. But if you listen, thank God now on the internet we can print the lyrics to the Stones songs, or we'd never know what he said, and they kind of mixed his voice down in the band. I always heard on purpose because it just kind of added. It was almost like a rhythm instrument. And I love Mick Jagger, and that was the appeal of the Stones. They're a sloppy band, but a great band, and they're tight in their sloppiness. They're sloppy they're sloppy like a fox. But Jagger's perfect for that band, obviously, needless to say. But I think if you were trying to stick him in a tuxedo and have him sing some really nice ballad or something, at least, certainly he would have to change his approach at the very least. So I included him on this list. I love Mick Jagger, so I'm not cutting down Mick Jagger. But, if you compare him to like a Roger Daltrey, it's just apples and oranges, really. So I love Mick Jagger, but and I think he's a great singer for the Stones. But if you're just looking at somebody that just as a vocal artist, not a rock and roll star artist, but just a vocal artist, Karen Carpenter or someone. Mick Jagger, I think his overall packaging is why he's so great, and not necessarily just the awesome technique of his voice or something. I think we all understand what I'm saying. Another one that's kind of like that is Ringo Starr. I remember when Ringo Starr, I'm old enough to remember when he had hits like No, 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 I Don't Smoke It No More, and It Don't Come Easy, and people used to always say he couldn't sing, and I love Ringo Starr. He's the perfect Beatle. He was the perfect drummer, But I just remember people saying that, and he's got a pretty small range, who am I to criticize, but maybe, he might even say that, and they pick songs for him that he sounds great on. Photograph, what a great song, It's easy to sing, but not like Ringo, because it's not how, it's the feeling he gives to the song, and in a way, his voice is perfect for it. But some of those songs from the early and mid '70s, you wouldn't, he's not. You're not buying it because the voice is so pure and beautiful. It's Ringo. But a couple others I thought I'd mention. One is Ian Hunter from Mott the Hoople, and then his solo career. I love Mott the Hoople a lot. But I remember people used to cut down he was kind of one of those people that they were never going to be really commercial because of the quality of his voice. I remember in high school, a lot of kids didn't really listen to Mott the Hoople, but the kind of cool kids, I tried to be one, I don't know if I was, but the kids that were like into good albums and everything loved Mott the Hoople. But a lot of the other kids, if they did happen to hear something, would always say his voice was horribly, and especially if all the young dudes that has that style to it, but even on that, but if you listen to a lot of their album songs, he had that kind of nasal quality in his voice, which was perfect for the band, really, but it was an acquired taste. And I just remember people always kind of cutting down I have Mott the Hoople, and a couple songs on there. One of my favorite songs is Marionette. I don't know if you know that song. Alice is another good one, but particularly Marionette, his voice is, it's not what you would call a commercial voice. I think it was great for FM rock radio, but I think that the voice was not what a lot of people would associate with being a good singer, like a Bad Company or Adultery or someone. So another artist that kind of like that I love also, that I remember people used to say the voice wasn't any good, was Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull. I love Jethro Tull. And one of the best things about Jethro Tull is Ian Anderson singing and playing solo acoustic guitar. I mean, that I think that's underappreciated, like Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day, and some of those songs where he's just up there by himself with an acoustic guitar are so great. But again, I think he had a voice that was very unique and distinct, but it wasn't necessarily the kind of voice that just a commercial A&R person would see as just a standalone great voice. I think it was him, and his songs were brilliant, but and his voice was what it was. But another thing is, some of those guys might not spend a lot of time thinking about their voice, particularly back in the countercultural days. They'd kind of grab a guitar and just sing away, and in a way that was what that music was so great. It was from the heart, it was authentic. But sometimes I don't think they maybe worried that much about it, or at least some of them didn't, There was another one that a lot of people would say doesn't have a good voice. It was Neil Young. I happen to love Neil Young. And I think I've seen documentaries on Neil Young, and the stuff he did, like with Crazy Horse and Buffalo Springfield, he was in Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young was always great. But when he started doing those solo acoustic albums, I guess a lot of record companies didn't even want to release it. They thought just that voice of his, that kind of real high nasal way he sang. But it's kind of ironic again. That was became a signature sound. When you hear it, you know it's Neil Young. So there's a lesson there somewhere. But I know I've seen a lot in Canada. Some of the radio stations didn't even want to play that, I guess, and they would compare it to someone like Gordon Lightfoot, who's got such a beautiful baritone. You know, I mean, you could stick Gordon Lightfoot in a tuxedo and he could sing love songs, and I never heard. He always just sings his own stuff, but his voice was of that caliber. That he could croon a ballad, I'm sure, and it'd be just great. He had a really good voice. Neil Young, he was great on playing Neil Young stuff, and you know what? That's great. So again, we're not trying to be critical. I'm just there's just some opinions I have. Another one is Pete Townshend. You listen to the demos of the Who. He's not. I mean, he's musical. They're not bad, but you listen to like because he would do a lot like "Won't Get Fooled Again" and Bob O'Reilly and a lot of those great songs off Who's Next, and he would do them all himself, and then so that would help the band to learn the songs. But when you listen to his versions and then you hear Roger Daltrey sing them, you realize these songs wouldn't have become what they were with Townshend's voice as much as now he was the brilliant mind behind, right? He wrote all those songs, and are there any better? But it was the golden pipes of Roger Daltrey that made those what they were. That's something I didn't realize when I was younger, how important a good singer is, and that's interesting. I think if you really look at the Who, because Pete Townshend, he had a solo career, like tough guys, and but I think his voice, it was kind of like what we were saying about Ian Anderson. It was what it was. It was his voice. It was how he sang. He was a guitarist and a songwriter, and he could sing, and sing in key and everything. But thank God he had Roger Daltrey in the band to really add that other element, because you get a really top tier voice in there, and it makes such a difference. And if you don't think that, just listen to some of the Townshend demos where he sang them. Always kind of reminds me of some of these guys maybe don't spend that much time thinking about it. I remember the Tigers used to have a guy pitching. When I was a kid in Detroit, the Tigers had a guy that pitched named Mickey Lolich, and he was a great pitcher. We won 3 games in the World Series when I was a kid, against Bob Gibson. But the guy he had like a 97 batting average. I mean, .097. I mean, he was and they didn't have the DH back then when I was really little, so it's kind of funny. Well, he never worked on it. He worked on his pitching all the time, and he didn't pay attention. He was ninth batter, and they had to leave him in there. And if the situation in the game called for him to, he had to hit, and you couldn't pull him out or something, and they didn't use relief pitchers as much back then. But he just never worked. You just grab a bat and go swing it 3 pitches, and strike out, fall out once in a while. That would be kind of... He did it at home run in the '68 World Series. That was awesome. It was like the only hit he got. But I feel like that's some of these guys that are such great guitarists and songwriters. They just kind of sing how they sing, and they don't really think about it. Whereas some of these other guys really they turn it into an art form. But you listen to Pete Townshend, the demos, and they're good. The music's great. You think, wow, that's a great song, but it's Roger Daltrey's voice set those songs off, and it's a great example of how important good vocals are, because the Who went on to become... Roger Daltrey didn't write, I don't think, any of those songs. Pete Townshend wrote those songs, and he can sing them all. He could, and he sings, parts of them like Don't Cry, Don't Raise Your Eye. He in concert, you'll hear his voice in some passages and so on. But when you hear Daltrey sing them, you realize how important a real top-tier voice is to set off top-tier songs. They don't grow on trees, and Daltrey's got it. Okay, this one you knew was coming, Bob Dylan. Now, I love Dylan. Now, whenever anyone tells me Dylan can't sing, I always look at Lay Lady Lay, just all of Blood on the Tracks, really. You're going to make me lonesome when you go. Such a beautiful voice, some of those ballads he did. But his, I remember Joan when they did "We Are the World" in the 1980s with Michael Jackson, and there were about 50 different stars up there. They had Dylan, and he sang a line, and Joan Rivers used to guest host on the Johnny Carson show back in those days, and one of her jokes was Ethiopia, because the record was to raise money for children in Ethiopia or Somalia or a country where there was a famine. But she said Ethiopia raised $3 million to get Bob Dylan off the record. And I had a friend that was a huge Dylan fan, and he went to see Bob Dylan, and he'd never seen Dylan. This was years ago, but he was a huge Dylan fan, and he said about an hour into the show, and he had the big epiphany that Dylan couldn't sing. Because I think he was another guy that just kind of opened his mouth and sang and didn't worry too much. And sometimes you'd catch him with these beautiful vocals, like "Lay Lady Lay." But if you listen, like "Stuck Inside a Mobile" with the Memphis Blues again, he's just got lyrics. He's just lining them out, and they're great. I love Dylan. So, but he's definitely, he's not Andy Williams or Perry Como. He's better than that in a way, obviously. But just looking at he's one that people always cite as an example of someone who can't sing. Ironically, that's probably, because he's so expressive with his voice. That's when it works. That's one of the reasons he has such a distinct sound. So not cutting Dylan down. I love Bob Dylan. He is a poet. But if you looked at him just as a singer, not as a songwriter, not as an artist, just a singer, told him to go in the studio and sing "And I Love You So" or "Rainy Days and Mondays" or something, he would not be considered a good voice. No matter. So Bob Dylan Christmas album. Must be Santa, Here's another one. I thought about, I was trying to come up with 10, so some of these are kind of hard because these are all people I love, Joe Cocker. Okay, I love Joe Cocker. He's one of the great blues singers, R&B singers, or hard rock singers. But you got to admit, what would I do? There's a reason John Belushi kind of spoofed him on Saturday Night Live all those years ago. What little help from my friends. His version is awesome, but that scream, it's almost a parody, And "You Are So Beautiful" is the best, worst vocal ever. I mean, that last note on the end of "You Are So Beautiful," I've read people that, were just appalled that went on the record, but it's another case where people loved it. That went on to be kind of one of his most famous songs. And it's beautiful because it's from the heart. And, I think there's a lesson there somewhere, but, it wasn't some smooth, silky, romantic take. It was romantic in its way, but so I put Joe Cocker down there. I didn't know. Here's another one, Sonny Bono. Okay, another guy. Sonny Bono was stupid like a fox. He was a really smart man. If you ever see interviews with him, he let Cher make fun of him all the way to the bank. And but if you listen to his voice, he was another one. He just kind of opened up and sang whatever that came out, and he was a great entertainer and a great, like I said, he was stupid like a fox. He was actually a great songwriter. He wrote "Needles and Pins." Of course, all the Sonny and Cher hits like "The Beat Goes On" and "I Got You, Babe," but also like "All I Ever Need Is You." He was, and he worked with Phil Spector, so. And to some extent, maybe you could say singing bad was his shtick, and Cher, I'm almost could have included Cher. Cher is a great entertainer that, has her own way of singing. It's kind of sloppy in some ways, I'm sure people would say, but Sonny Bono is pretty bad, almost funny. But I love Sonny Bono, and the older I get, it's maybe a nostalgia factor, but I love to watch those old Sonny and Cher shows. I wish they had shows like that today, but part of it was just he'd grab that mic and just belt it out, and he didn't care, but he got in a way, again, a lesson there somewhere. He got the song across. The song came across, so that's what a good singer, I guess, does, But if you were looking for sort of a study and somebody that sang great, it definitely wouldn't be Sonny Bono. And last, and this to me is probably one of the more legitimate ones on here. That's not just funny. Is Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix is a he even said that when I think he said when he heard Dylan sing that he knew he had a shot. To me, Hendrix was a great songwriter. I think he was a good songwriter anyway. But he was first and foremost a guitarist, and he only ever played really mostly with power trios. So, but I think a lot of, particularly in that period, but songs were just a vehicle for him to play guitar in a lot of cases, and he'd sing a little bit and then just play for a lot more than he sang. And I think he's kind of like that pitcher for the Detroit Tigers I was talking about, Mickey Lolich. He maybe didn't pay that much attention to his voice, and never really, thought about it. But actually, a lot of younger people, I actually saw a lot when the anniversary of his death here last September, there were a lot of kind of younger people on YouTube videos I saw saying that, they just never got Hendrix. They don't like Hendrix. And I think maybe to some extent it is true that, he never really lived to see the production values increase in the 70s, and he never really got out of that just kind of wild late 60s acid rock, where you'd have a verse or two of songs and then, 15 minutes of guitar solos. So, but, as much as I love Jimi Hendrix, obviously I don't think he the thing that's famous about Jimi Hendrix is not his singing. And you isolated his he never even really. I always thought how sad it was he died, because it's kind of like Clapton and Cream. I mean, look at all the stuff Clapton did after Cream broke up, and he got out of that just crazy, 30-minute long solo stuff, and started working on songs with some good producers, and had a little bigger band that could support him and open him up a little bit to more musicality. And Hendrix died right, I think, on the cusp of that. I think he would have, and because I'm sure he was probably like Clapton. He would have developed his own voice. Clapton didn't sing much before his first solo album, on a track or two, in Cream and Blues Breakers. He sang "Rambling on My Mind." I always thought that was kind of true with Hendrix. He was a guitar player first and foremost. He ended up singing a lot of his own songs just because of the format. But I don't that was kind of in the time period that was fine, and people wanted to hear him play the guitar, and he'd sing some. But you never heard any much, if any, harmonies on Hendrix. Even really, it was pretty much just him and. So as much as I love Hendrix, some of these other guys were kind of funny. I love Ringo Starr, and Mick Jagger's obviously one of the greatest singers in the world, and I just can't emphasize enough. I'm not cutting down any of these people. They're all some of my favorites. But Hendrix, I think, legitimately is an example. Maybe Pete Townshend too, of someone that really, never had. He never thought that much about how important singing is. I think I was like that when I was a kid. Of course, in my little world, but singing is really important, and getting a good singer, it makes a difference. You take a great song, and if it's not sung that great, that the average person doesn't like it. The thing about some of those Who songs, "Won't Get Fooled Again," if you had kind of a thin second tenor voice, singing them, might have been the same everything, except for that voice, versus, Roger Daltrey just like roaring like a lion on those songs, made the difference between a song that's probably would be kind of buried in the archives of rock and roll albums, and songs that are on the radio all the time. And so voices are important, and so a lot of these people like Jagger, you could say they can't sing, but they actually were perfect for what they did, like in the same way Daltrey is. But I think Hendrix is a case for maybe he didn't pay any attention to his voice, and just kind of got up there and sang, and saw these songs as a vehicle to play his guitar, which was really what Hendrix was about. And tragically, he never really got to develop. I mean, I now that I'm older, I look and I thought, geez, he was just a kid, man. It's like Dwayne Allman. I watch these. I didn't think when I was a kid, I didn't notice it, but now I watch it and I see how young they are. Man, that's so sad. These guys were in their 20s and they died. And you look at a career like Eric Clapton and how much he's done since then. Hendrix never got to do any of that. But one of the takeaways is that he never really focused on his voice in the song, which is I always think that's kind of like Cream. Cream. Everybody talks about the musicianship of Cream. They sang, but and they said Cream actually had some harmonies and everything anyway. But I don't think Hendrix ever really did. So anyway, those are my top 10 worst singers. With kind of a little epitaph for Jimi Hendrix. He never really got to develop. Never really even broke out of that kind of power trio format, which is a blast. It's a good party and it's good rock and roll. But I think when the production values and the things rose just right after he died, even within a year or two, the album sounded a lot better. And look at the Who, like the difference between the Who in '72 and '66 or something, and but it's a lesson there. The vocals are really important. Yeah, I think the Who is one of the, and who knows, maybe those Jethro Tull and Mott the Hoople songs are kind of like that. You can't imagine them being sung by anybody else, but those bands never really were the household names. Really, they're pretty famous in the '70s, but they always were kind of FM cult bands. They had radio hits, but you look at the Who, and part of the reason the Who has lasted so long is I think that voice of Roger Daltrey. He wasn't a songwriter. He's actually a good musician though. He played guitar and he plays harmonica. So a lot of these guys are good musicians just because they're up there. Don't think they, Roger Daltrey's a musician. But it just shows you how important voice is. That's something that I realized too late in life, but voice is really important. You can take a great song, and in some ways it's great to hear the artist sing it, like it's cool to hear Pete Townshend sing, Bob O'Reilly and things, because he wrote the song and, he puts, it's like a singer-songwriter almost, but the real power of that came when you had a really top-notch singer like Roger Daltrey sing it. And a couple of these people, I don't think, some of them are kind of fun, and their personality comes out when they sing, and that's sort of what people like. But the Hendrix example is someone I think that didn't really ever, develop his voice and didn't pay much attention to it, and maybe even in some ways the song. I like Little Wing and When the Wind Cries Mary, and those are nice songs. But he was all about the guitar, and I don't think he paid much attention to songwriting, really, like maybe a Beatles type band did. And he certainly, I don't think, paid much attention to singing, and that may have well changed had he lived into the '70s when classic rock really sort of bloomed, in my opinion. Like the early '70s. That's when you had some of the greatest albums ever made. Unfortunately, Hendrix died right there, but he is, some of these other ones are kind of fun, but he's an example of, I think, a more serious way looking at how important singing is. Well, I went on too long, like I always do, but enjoy these comments. Tell me what you think in the comments section.